I think we've got everybody in their seats and it's 11 o'clock. So I will call the Committee of the Whole to order on March 5th and the time is 11 o'clock. And welcome everybody for our meeting today and the first meeting in March. Hoping for spring flowers to be blooming soon. And I just want to acknowledge as we get started that the City of Maple Ridge is on the traditional and unceded territories of the Katzie First Nation and the Kwantlen First Nation. Can I get a motion? I can just go straight through. I don't need to. Okay, I'll let the clerk do their little blurb.
Thank you. Good morning. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be available to the public for playback on our website. Committee of the Whole is council's receipt and review of information to ensure council can debate and vote on issues at a future council meeting. No voting takes place on bylaws or resolutions during Committee of the Whole. Council has been provided with voting cards, green for in favor, red for opposed, and yellow for point of order. Members of the public who would like to speak will be provided an opportunity later in the meeting during community forum. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a year since I've been in this seat. I got to get used to it again. Okay, so can I get a motion to approve the agenda as presented? It's been moved by Mayor Rumi, seconded by Councillor Schiller. All those in favor? Opposed, carried. Moving on to the minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of February 20th, 2024, moved by Mayor Rumi, seconded by Councillor Duick. Any errors or omissions in those minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, carried. Okay, there's no delegations today, so moving on to 5.1.
Thank you. The only item on the agenda today is application 2021-280-RZ for properties located at 22936, 22944, 22952, 22964, and 22974 Dewdney Trunk Road to enter into a housing agreement for the subject property to ensure dwelling units will be used as rental housing in perpetuity, and staff are in attendance to present.
Right. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee. I don't have a remote control, so if the corporate officer could just advance the slides as I go through. So this application is for a housing agreement bylaw, which is concurrent with the rezoning application for this project. Oh, there it is there. Thanks. Which received third reading. And since the application has received third reading, the applicant, Kirchhoff Development, has offered to ensure that this building is a rental building for not less than 30 years. And that is the subject of the housing agreement bylaw before us today. So subject properties on Dewdney Trunk Road. This is it on the ortho photo showing the built environment, noting that this application is at third reading, and there's another application that had received third reading immediately to the west between this property and the property, the gas station on the corner. It's the property designated urban residential major corridor in the official community plan. And as noted, the subject properties are being redeveloped to accommodate a 6-story apartment building containing 178 purpose-built rental units. That is the subject of this bylaw to ensure the proposed building will be used as a rental housing for 30 years from the date of adoption of the housing agreement bylaw. Should council adopt the bylaw, council would give first and second, third readings of the bylaw. And then the bylaw would be brought forward at the same date for adoption as a zoning amendment bylaw. So they go together lockstep at the end of the process. And so the recommendation is simply that the housing agreement bylaw 7992/2024 for the subject properties on Dewdney Trunk Road be given first, second, and third reading. Madam Chair and Committee.
Thank you. So if I can get a motion to move this to council, so moved by Mayor Rumi, seconded by Councillor Youssef. Any questions? Got Mayor Rumi, Youssef, and sorry, Councillor Duick, did you have your hand up for a question? Nope. Okay. Mayor Rumi, go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. Don't like his microphone. Okay, you have to like bang it. Thank you very much for the presentation. I am confused because in our package, it says that dwelling units will be used as rental housing in perpetuity, yet here it says 30 years.
Yes.
Can you clarify that?
Madam Chair, to Mayor Rumi and the committee, I'm just noted afterwards, I meant to mention that. So the report and the agreement say that it'll be used in perpetuity, subject to it being able to be not used for rental units if there's demolition of the building. So the wording is actually 30 years. The agreement has an erroneous clause in it that says in perpetuity, subject to if the building is being removed within 30 years, it can be used for non-rental units after. So the wording is not quite the wording in the agreement. And I've noted that. We've talked with the clerk's department. So that's the actual agreement is 30 years. And we'd have to bring that forward as an amended report to council next week, amending that paragraph.
So 30 years go by,
Mhm.
what happens after that?
So subject to the agreement and the bylaw, after 30 years, then the project would not have to be used for rental. It could be used for strata. But I have to note that if you have a rental building, a previously occupied rental building, the conversion of a previously rental building has to go through a strata conversion process. And that would apply to even existing rental building. So under the Strata Property Act, any building that's rental, whether it was subject to a housing agreement that expired at 30 years or just a rental building, to stratify it, it has to be reviewed by the city at that time. And a report has to go to council for them to authorize the conversion of the building to strata. And that's standard to all buildings that are rental in the province.
So just trying to get some context on this. We currently have other units that are under the rental agreements.
Mhm.
What are those terms like? Are
So
they the
Madam,
same or?
they vary. There's, Madam Chair, through to Mayor Rumi, some are in perpetuity and then some are for 30 years and some for other terms. So we looked at a few of those in the process.
And my final question is just staying on the same theme here. How did we get on this one where we have some in perpetuity, of my understanding, 99 years to down to 30 years? Where is this decision coming from?
This offer was made by the applicant after the rezoning had gone through to third reading. So staff had accepted the 30-year term, and that other applicants that were purpose-built rental were set out to be purpose-built rental typically at the very beginning of the process, going through first, second, and third reading of the zoning bylaw. But the applicant that has offered to do this after third reading, so we agreed to a 30-year term in this, given that it wasn't even envisioned, they could just proceed to adoption for a strata building.
All right. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councillor Youssef.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to staff for the report and presentation. Through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. McMullen. What is the classification of Dudney Trunk Road?
It's an arterial road and it's a major road network road in the region.
Okay, arterial road. And do we have, through the chair again to Mr. McMullen, do we have a policy about access off of arterial roads? Sorry.
Yes, there's a policy that engineering and the city have on arterial roads that there would not be permanent access off of an arterial road. And that issue was dealt with during the rezoning in that there's a temporary access off of Dudney Trunk Road. And this application is dedicating a lane to the rear of this. So there's a temporary driveway going off Dudney Trunk Road. Then there's a lane being dedicated at the rear. And then that lane continues west to behind the gas station. And because it's a half-width lane, it becomes a one-way lane. So we have a temporary in-out off of Dudney Trunk Road, a full-width lane behind this project, and then further into the project to the west. And then it becomes a one-way out lane onto Brunette. Such time that the gas station may redevelop, we would seek to have the line wind to a full-width lane there. And this would be reviewed by the engineering department going into the zoning of the project.
Thank you
And
for
I
that.
defer to
And
the
through
manager.
you again, Madam Chair, to follow up on that, with the laneway access, do we have any sort of a time frame as to when that will become active and then the temporary access off of Dudney Trunk will be shut down?
We don't have a timeline in that making the lane a two-way lane at the last leg behind the gas station is contingent on that property developing, and we have no application for development on that property.
So to clarify through you, Madam Chair, at this time, the current temporary access that's being given may actually become the permanent access until or if the property to the west develops, correct?
It will be a permanent access until that lane, the property develops and the lane becomes a two-way lane to Burnett. Yes.
Okay, last question through you, Madam Chair. How many parking units do we have or parking spots at this development? I just want to see how many cars approximately will be accessing the site.
That was a subject of the rezoning report, which unfortunately I don't have. I could bring that forward to council next week to look at that.
I'd greatly appreciate that. With 178 units, I think it's pertinent to see how many cars we're gonna have going in and out, plus of course the visitor spots.
Mhm.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Counselor
Mr.
Schiller.
Mullen.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff, I just wanted to ask a little bit about sort of, I haven't seen this type of agreement before. So assuming that this agreement moves forward and this agreement is signed, what is the ability of either a different council on the city side or a different owner to change the agreement?
Well, we haven't had that happen before, but the bylaw would have to be repealed and the agreement would have to be agreed to by council to be removed. So council would have to in open session repeal the bylaw, discharge the housing agreement on title. And then that still leaves the general process of a previously occupied rental building under the Strata Property Act has to go to council for consideration of conversion of that, which applies to any rental building. And that would involve meeting the Strata Property Act requirements, which involve looking at the rental supply and this is a bit general, but the rental supply in the municipality and meeting the current building code to a certain extent at the time. And that would be a public council decision. So that would apply to any housing agreement if it were to be reversed.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful just to sort of understand. So this is a bonus question. I don't know if you know off the top of your head, but would the city have the ability to initiate a change or would the change have to come from an owner in terms of if there was a desire to change it?
I would have to look into that with our lawyers. We never had such a situation occur, Madam Chair,
Fair enough.
Councillor Schiller.
Okay, thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Thank you. Counselor Tan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to staff. I have a question about that there's a term in there subject to earlier demolition of the buildings or the existing buildings. Can I just ask what that means?
That was a clause in another precedent example, which is something that we're going to replace. I said that was an error. So that one basically that temporary wording was basically provided that the building would be used in perpetuity for rental, but if the building was demolished, then it could be demolished basically with after 30-year period. So, and that's not the intent. The intent is just to have a straight 30-year term on this agreement.
Okay, just to make sure I understand that when it comes back, the report comes back to us amended for next year, that
Yes,
the early demolition, the term earlier demolition of rental dwelling units, that will be taken out.
yes, that is coming forward in the council report next week.
Thank you. I also see here in the contract or the draft agreement that all dwelling units shall be rented only on a month-to-month basis or under a tenancy agreement having a fixed term not exceeding 3 years. What is the reason for us including a clause about the length of the tenancy?
Madam Chair to Councillor Tan, the intent is that this is just a regular rental building. Most rental buildings are rented month to month and it's not a long-term lease building.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is that standard in housing agreements?
That's standard in the housing agreements, and the housing agreement is other agreements that we have that in it also.
Thank you.
Thank you. Not seeing any other questions. I just had a couple of questions actually on the same section of it. One was on, so use occupancy subdivision and no separate sale restrictions, number 3, again, on the month-to-month basis, not exceeding 3 years. I just want to make sure the month-to-month is not going to be in violation of our short-term rental bylaw whenever it comes back to us. I can't remember what we landed on. I think it may have been 30 or 60 days, but if that bylaw is like 60 days, is that this will need to be changed?
No, Madam Chair, this is just ensuring this is rented as a normal building, and all other provisions of our zoning bylaw and business licensing bylaw still apply to this building. So,
Okay. So our short-term rental, if it says you cannot rent less than 60 days, how does that change the language in here, which is month to month? And I
Uh,
can't remember what the exact number
Yeah.
was in our short-term bylaw that's coming back to us.
We will have to ensure that that doesn't conflict, not just with this agreement, but any other rental building, because most rental buildings are rented month to month throughout the city and in the province. So
Okay.
that's something that we could look at in the short-term rental.
Okay, and something
bylaw.
for us to think about when that short-term rental
Yes.
bylaw comes back to us as well. What does
Yeah.
that impact other agreements? And then just on number 4, I just have a quick question. So it says no dwelling unit may be occupied except by an individual who occupies pursuant to the rental agreement meets the requirements of section 3. I'm just curious why it says an individual.
This is, as I further to this is our standard agreement except for the 30-year perpetuity clause. I think the intent, this is having looked at several of these, they all have the same wording, is that one owner or one person cannot rent several different units and then sublet them. I think that's the provision.
Okay, so that
Yeah.
the understanding behind it is that you can only rent. Okay, because I took it differently as that only one person could live in that unit, and I wanted to know if it was just a language thing or what the intent was.
Right.
Yeah, because it says may be occupied except by an individual who occupies. Okay. All right, I just want to make sure that we can't have more than one person in each unit. That is it for me. Any other questions? Counselor Tan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To you, the staff, I'm just new to tenancy housing agreements for rental, and I just want to make sure I understand. So just going back to the clause about the fixed term not exceeding 3 years, including any rights of renewal, just to make sure I understand. So at the end of the 3 years, do folks have an ability to negotiate with the landlord for renewal, or is that off the table?
After the 30 years,
After 3 years, sorry.
the 3 years.
So there's a clause in here, all dwelling units shall be rented only on a month-to-month basis or under a residential tenancy
Oh, that.
agreement, having a fixed term not exceeding 3 years,
Right.
including any rights of renewal.
So Madam Chair, that would allow then the owner and the tenants to renegotiate a new rental agreement. So
I see, and that doesn't preclude their ability to have that negotiation.
no, it's just the idea is that these are not long-term lease. Because if you'd be defeating the intent of having a rental building, if people were able to lease the units for 30 years, say, that's.
And thank you for that. And just to make sure I understand, because I understand a lot of folks in our community are looking to rent long-term, and I wonder if staff could sort of elaborate to me the necessity of having that 3-year term,
Right.
fixed 3-year term and not longer
Okay.
baked into our housing agreement.
I think that, Madam Chair, through Councillor Tan, that's a broader question we'd have to look at, and that this agreement, except for the 30-year section, which has changed from perpetuity, is being based on legal review and development with our lawyers in the past and has been used to all applications. So I think that's a sort of a broader question looking at the agreement.
Thank you. And you know what? I would appreciate that clarification just because
Yeah.
it's such an important topic. And
Right.
I think a lot of folks in our community do rent a unit for more than 3 years. So that would be just in terms of that security of tenancy to folks. That might be an interesting information, at least for council to have.
Madam Chair, through Councillor Tan, I'll look into that and read into that and then consult with our lawyers who developed the template.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Those were sort of my questions too, to bring, we're kind of on the same train of thought there today. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, moving it to council. Councillor Tan, did you? Yeah. All right, it's passed. Thank you. Okay, so next up is community forum. And I believe you have a little thing you remind us all of.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next item is item 10, Community Forum. Participants in the Community Forum are reminded that there should be no discussion of public hearing bylaws which have not yet reached conclusion. Each speaker has 2 minutes to speak to council. A second opportunity may be provided once all speakers in the queue have had an opportunity to speak. The total time allotted for Community Forum is 15 minutes. If you wish to inquire about additional opportunities to address council, please contact the corporate officer. For members of the public who would like to speak during Community Forum, clearly state your name and city of residence before beginning your comments. If participating electronically, please use the raise hand icon and turn on your camera. If you're attending in person, please come forward to the podium when the chair invites speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm not seeing anybody online, so I'll go to those in the chambers today. Is anybody like to say anything in our community forum? All right, I'm not seeing anybody step up to the mic. I'm just going to double check again. There's nobody online. So I think that concludes our meeting for today, and I'd like to adjourn the meeting at 11:20. Thank you very much for joining.